Welcome to our sanctuary. Find a comfortable position, take a deep breath, and let it go slowly. Feel the weight of the day begin to dissolve. Tonight, we drift to the vast, silent heart of the Arabian desert. This is a place defined by its contrasts: crushing heat by day, absolute cold by night, and an overwhelming sense of ancient, echoing silence. In this silence, the human mind searches for company. It searches for explanations for the inexplicable. For the desert people of antiquity, the answer was not found in gods or angels, but in the unseen, vibrant reality of the Djinn. The Djinn are beings of profound mystery. They are made, so the folklore tells us, not of earth or light, but of smokeless fire, an elemental unseen heat. They move in the shadows of the dry mountains, dwell in abandoned wells, and hold court in phantom cities built from the dust of the empty quarter. They are morally complex, capable of great benevolence, sudden mischief, or absolute malice. They share our moral choice, but not our visible world. So, let the deep quiet of this ancient land envelop you. Let the gentle hiss of the sand on the wind become the soft whisper of the unknown. Tonight, we ask a simple yet profound question. What invisible beings share our world, and what comfort can we find in assigning names to the chaos that surrounds us? Settle in, breathe deeply, and allow the secrets of the smokeless fire to guide your mind toward rest. To truly grasp the psychological role of the Djinn in the ancient Arabian world, we must set aside modern, fantastical depictions and immerse ourselves in the original, foundational mythology. The story of the Djinn begins not with magic lamps, but with fire. According to pre-Islamic and early Islamic folklore, the human realm is not the only one. The most important distinction in Arabian cosmology is the material from which beings are made. Angels were created from nur, pure light. Humans were created from tin, clay, or earth. But the Djinn were created from maraj min nar, smokeless fire, or the intense, unsettling heat that burns without visible smoke. Imagine the desert night, vast and cold. Now, picture a different kind of fire, a heat that is unseen, volatile, and deeply penetrating. This is the very essence of the Djinn. Because they are made of this elemental, smokeless fire, they are fundamentally different from humans, yet share our world. They are invisible to the human eye, capable of shape-shifting, and possess a lifespan that stretches across millennia. Unlike humans, who are bound by the predictable constraints of time and space, the Djinn move between the physical world and their own hidden realm with ease. The sound here would be the subtle, unsettling crackle of heat without visible flame, a whisper of intense, unseen energy just beyond the flickering light of your own fire, the subtle suggestion that something powerful and fluid shares the immediate space. This origin story places the Djinn in a perpetual state of flux, between the divine light of the angels and the solid earth of humanity, a creature of boundless, powerful impulse. Fire is necessary for life. It cooks, it heats, it forges, but it is also utterly destructive if uncontrolled, and the Djinn embody this precise dual nature. They are not inherently good or evil, but are simply beings of raw elemental power. The second crucial element of the Djinn's reality is their geography. While humans inhabit the visible world of villages, oases, and cities, the Djinn primarily dwell in the deep, empty places, the voids where human order dissolves. Their influence is strongest in the realm's abandoned ruins, desolate cemeteries, deep wells, rocky mountains, and, most commonly, in the terrifying, formless expanse of the desert itself. These desolate locations are considered ritually impure, or simply too chaotic for human settlement. The sounds of their influence would be the unsettling, echoing voices carried on the wind. The kind of sounds that make a lone traveller question his own sanity in the profound loneliness of the dunes. The Djinn are believed to have their own magnificent phantom cities, built from sand and air, that exist just out of human sight. The most famous of these mythical seats of power is Iram of the Pillars, a vast city rumoured to be the capital of a great Djinn kingdom, now buried forever under the deep desert. For the ancient desert traveller, this belief was not simply folklore. It was a fundamental safety compact. It meant that the silence of the wilderness was never truly empty. Every strange shadow, every sudden sandstorm, every moment of profound disorientation could be attributed to the action of a Djinn. allowing the nomad to survive the environment by giving the void a set of rules. For instance, the fierce and powerful Ifrit is a formidable class of Djinn, often associated with vengeance and overwhelming fire, while the ghoul is a shape-shifting, cannibalistic desert entity, typically found near cemeteries, preying on lost travelers. This categorization allowed the desert people to manage the unmanageable chaos of their surroundings. To survive, a traveler developed a deep code of desert etiquette. Never enter abandoned places without announcing your presence. Never throw hot water onto the ground, lest it strike a hidden Djinn child. And always use a protective phrase before sleeping. These were the rules of coexistence with the powerful, unseen forces sharing their world. The most complex and unsettling aspect of the Djinn is their fundamental likeness to humanity. Despite being made of fire, the Djinn are moral beings with free will, a feature that distinguishes them from the blindly obedient angels. They are capable of making profound moral choices, of choosing between goodness and malice. This creates a terrifying reality. The world is full of invisible beings who share our free will, but not our material constraints. The folklore establishes that the Djinn live in tribes, cities, and communities. They have laws, leaders, and intricate social codes. They fall in love, marry, and raise families, often possessing lifespans that dwarf human memory, though their customs remain entirely alien to us. In some rare and often tragic tales, they have even intermarried with humans. They are not immortal. Though long-lived, the Djinn die, and their deaths are often sudden and violent, sometimes at the hands of powerful angels or even human sorcerers. Historically, because they live longer and move faster, the Djinn were often sought out by ancient poets or shamans who believed they possessed knowledge of the future or the hidden past. However, the folklore warns that their knowledge is always filtered, veiled, and often misleading, underscoring their unreliable, capricious nature. This element of shared free will means that a traveller encountering a Djinn might find a benevolent protector, a neutral trickster, or a hostile murderer. The uncertainty itself becomes the primary psychological stressor, turning every unfamiliar corner of the desert into a moral crossroads. The Djinn, in their moral ambiguity, served as an ancient form of social control and environmental caution. Respect the desolation, respect the quiet, or suffer the inevitable invisible consequences. The most unsettling power of the Djinn, and the one that fueled the most pervasive anxiety in the desert, was their ability to shapeshift. This was not merely a parlor trick, it was a fundamental tool of interaction that blurred the boundary between the seen and the unseen, between friend and foe. Because they are made of smokeless fire, they possess a fluid, unstable form, allowing them to transform into almost anything: a wisp of smoke, a terrifying whirlwind, or a comforting human figure. The most common forms the Djinn adopted were those designed to test or lure the unwary traveller. Often, they appeared as snakes or scorpions hiding in the warmth of human homes or settlements. A sudden appearance of a viper in a quiet tent was rarely attributed to nature. It was a Djinn seeking to cause trouble, and the immediate fear this caused meant that travellers learned to clear and purify their spaces before rest. More insidiously, they would appear as familiar, harmless animals, such as a lonely stray dog or a beautiful camel, enticing a traveller to take them in, only to reveal their true, malevolent nature once inside the protective circle of the camp. The most profound psychological trap, however, was their ability to mimic human form. A Djinn might appear as a lost traveller, a beautiful woman in distress, or even a beloved family member who had died. The fear here was not of the monster, but of the betrayal of trust. Imagine a traveller, utterly alone, seeing a distant friend appear on the dune line, offering water or shelter. The traveller is forced into an immediate, silent calculation. Is this an act of grace, or is it a deception of the Ifrit, designed to lure me off the path and into the empty places? This possibility transformed every chance encounter in the desert, from a moment of relief into a moment of profound, cold suspicion. The atmosphere of this transformation is one of subtle dread, where the air may feel unnaturally cold, or the scent of the person might shift slightly, carrying a faint, acrid smell of ozone or ash. This uncertainty forced the desert people to rely on internal signs and codes, never trusting appearance, always trusting ritual. The vast, echoing silence of the deep desert served as the perfect theatre for the Djinn's power of illusion and auditory deception. In the empty quarter, where visual markers vanish and disorientation is common, the Djinn used sound to shatter the traveller's sanity and draw them into the most treacherous landscapes. The Djinn were masters of the hollow voice, the sound of someone calling your name from just beyond the range of the lamplight, or the faint, musical voice carried on the wind that promised water or gold. Often, travellers reported hearing the sounds of a bustling city, the clang of blacksmiths, the chatter of a market, or the joyful music of a wedding feast, only to follow the sound for hours and find nothing but endless, silent sand. These were the phantom cities, the realms of the Djinn bleeding into our own, designed specifically to play upon the human longing for comfort, community, and an end to the brutal isolation of the journey. A particularly insidious form of deception was the false guide. The Djinn might appear as a knowledgeable, trustworthy Bedouin, offering to lead the lost to an oasis. The traveller, desperate and exhausted, would follow the guide for days, noticing only subtle flaws. The guide's feet never truly touched the sand, or their shadow was abnormally long, or they never drank water. The sounds here would be the soft, rhythmic crunch of two sets of feet on the sand, one real and one just slightly too light, too fast, or too unsettlingly regular. A slow, the hypnotic sound designed to lull the victim into a false sense of security before the guide vanished and left them truly alone. This fear of auditory illusion had a practical function. It taught travellers not to trust their exhausted senses. It was a built-in cultural warning against the profound disorientation that leads to death in the desert. The fear of the Djinn's trickery was simply the fear of the desert's own capacity to create fatal, tempting mirages. The only salvation lay in silence, in refusing to chase the tempting sound, and in clinging to the quiet, steady reality of one's own breath. Among the various classes of Djinn, the ghoul represents the most primal and visceral fear, the desecration of the human body and the terror of cannibalism. The ghoul is the dark consequence of the desert's chaotic elements, a Djinn that feeds on human flesh, making it a powerful symbol of ultimate disorder and famine. The ghoul is most often associated with cemeteries and desolate, ancient ruins where travellers or victims might be buried. Imagine a lonely, forgotten graveyard where the wind only makes a dry, scratching sound. The ghoul is a creature that shifts its form to appear as a beautiful, harmless woman or an ordinary beast, but its primary hunting strategy is to lure humans into its hidden lairs, which are described as subterranean caverns filled with bones and the terrible smell of decay. The psychological power of the ghoul lies in its attack on the sacred burial customs of the desert people. The ancient reverence for the dead was absolute, and a proper burial ensured the soul's passage. The ghoul literally undoes this order by digging up and consuming the dead, or by attacking the living to ensure they never reach a proper grave. This created a profound, specific anxiety tied to travelling near places of death, emphasizing the need for quick, protective, and respectful burial rituals. The terrifying implication was that even after death, the chaos of the desert could still claim your physical form. Folklore provided specific, if unsettling, ways to repel a ghoul. One famous tale involves a hero recognizing the creature's true nature, often by its unusual feet, like hooves or claws, and then dispatching it with a single, powerful blow, often while reciting protective prayers. The story of the ghoul served as a constant, quiet reminder that the boundaries of life and death were fiercely protected, and that the emptiness of the desert was not always a spiritual void, but sometimes a physical trap set by those who despise the order of human existence. Not all Djinn encounters were sinister. Some of the most enduring stories associate the Djinn with acts of magnificent, impossible creation, cementing their role as beings of unparalleled power and engineering skill. The most famous example, of course, comes from the stories surrounding the prophet Solomon. The folklore describes Solomon not merely as a king, but as a master of the unseen world, given the power by the divine to command the Djinn. This narrative provided a crucial cultural function. It explained how massive, impossible projects, the kinds of monumental works that defied human logistics, could have been accomplished in antiquity. Imagine the effort required to lift colossal stone pillars, or to transport vast quantities of material across unforgiving deserts. When human effort failed to explain the scale, the Djinn provided the answer. The most magnificent feat attributed to the commanded Djinn was the construction of Solomon's great temple in Jerusalem. The Djinn labored tirelessly, moving mountains of stone, diving for pearls, and working in complete, silent obedience. The sound of this construction would not be the clang of human hammers, but the eerie silence of automated power, the soft scraping of immense stones moving without visible ropes or workers, and the low, continuous drone of unseen labor. This soundscape represents the Djinn's power being channeled and brought under the control of a righteous human will. Even the phantom cities built by the Djinn, such as Iram of the Pillars, served this purpose. These were described as being adorned with great, towering columns and unimaginable wealth, a hidden blueprint of architectural perfection that existed just beyond the veil of human sight. The stories of Solomon and the Djinn provided a psychological comfort in the face of human limitation. The greatest forces in the world were not always chaotic. They could be commanded, directed, and harnessed for the good of order and civilization. This belief in the possibility of controlling the unseen gave the ancient rulers a spiritual justification for their own monumental, often brutal, construction projects. The final, most intimate, and deeply unsettling interaction between humans and Djinn is the rare occurrence of love, marriage, or possession. These stories explore the extreme peril of allowing the boundary between the two worlds to collapse entirely. The folklore often tells of a Djinn becoming romantically infatuated with a human, usually due to their exceptional beauty or piety. Such a union might lead to a marriage, often with the Djinn maintaining its invisibility or shifting to human form only in private. These relationships are inherently tragic. The Djinn's long lifespan, elemental nature, and capricious temper always lead to sorrow, as the human partner is forced to live a life perpetually haunted by the unseen and unable to fully integrate their partner's power into the human world. The sound of this intimate relationship is one of unpredictability, a beautiful, soothing human voice, followed by the sudden low hiss of smokeless fire or the unsettling creak of a door opening with no one there. More common, and more terrifying, is possession. The folklore warns that a Djinn might enter the body of a human, often in retaliation for an offence, like accidentally throwing hot water, or simply out of malice. The human victim would exhibit sudden illness, irrational behaviour, or knowledge of things they could not possibly know. This belief provided a cultural explanation for severe mental illness or epilepsy, a way to categorize and treat the terrifying loss of self. The treatment for possession was a highly ritualized affair, involving powerful healers, priests, and the use of protective verses and incense. The healer's goal was not to harm the possessed, but to safely exorcise the Djinn, convincing the fire being to leave the human vessel in peace. The sounds of this ritual, the low, continuous chanting, the smell of purifying smoke, and the distorted cries of the possessed, were a terrifying reminder of the fragility of the human mind and the constant vigilance required to maintain one's own self against the powerful, chaotic intrusions of the unseen world. These stories served as a final, quiet caution. The boundary between fire and clay must be respected, or the cost is the loss of your very identity. The power and mystery of the Djinn extended deeply into the intellectual and artistic life of pre-Islamic Arabia, particularly within the world of poetry and divination. In the vast, silent desert, the poet, Sha'ir, was not merely an entertainer. He was the historian, the satirist, and the spiritual voice of his tribe. Their words were believed to hold immense power, capable of bestowing honour or inflicting devastating curses. This power was often believed to have a supernatural origin, the Djinn. The most potent and respected poets were often believed to have a personal Djinn companion, a kind of familiar spirit known as a qareen, which means companion, or one who is attached. This qareen, frequently a Djinn poet itself, was believed to whisper verses into the poet's ear, granting them extraordinary eloquence, unparalleled metaphor, and knowledge of distant events. The sound of this connection would be a low, continuous hum, a subtle, insistent ringing in the ears of the poet as they stared into the quiet night, waiting for the hidden word to be revealed. This explained their uncanny skill and the seemingly effortless brilliance of their verses, providing a cultural explanation for genius that transcended mere mortal talent. However, This gift came with a terrifying price. The relationship with the Qareen was often volatile and unpredictable. The poet might fall suddenly ill, suffer periods of crippling madness, or speak prophecies that were dangerously misleading, all attributed to the fickle nature of their fire-born companion. This uncertainty was a thought trap for the human mind, highlighting the peril of seeking power from sources that are morally ambiguous. The poet had to constantly negotiate the boundary between their own art and the unstable elemental source of their inspiration. The Djinn in this context were patrons of the arts, but they were also a constant, quiet threat to the sanity of the artists they chose to empower, transforming the act of creation itself into a dangerous form of spiritual bargain. For the nomadic tribes, survival depended not just on water and navigation, but on the disciplined maintenance of order within the tiny circle of the camp. The Djinn were always present, lurking just beyond the campfire light, and a specific set of quiet, rhythmic rituals were developed to ensure the safety of the sleeping people. This system of quiet vigilance was the desert equivalent of a home security system, relying entirely on faith and sound. Imagine the desert camp at night. The air is cold, the stars are brilliant, and the only reliable light source is the small, flickering campfire. The edge of the light represents the immediate border between the human world of order and the Djinn's world of chaos. One of the most critical rituals was the purification of the space before sleep. This often involved gently sweeping the ground to clear any small burrows or holes where a Djinn might have been hiding, and sprinkling salt around the perimeter. The sounds here are soft and deliberate. The low scrape of the brush on the sand and the subtle crunch of salt sounds of quiet, rhythmic human control over the chaotic ground. More importantly, the recitation of protective phrases, such as Bismillah, in the name of God, was mandatory before performing any action that might accidentally offend a Djinn, such as extinguishing the fire, drawing water, or entering a dark tent. The voice, kept low and steady, served as a verbal shield, a repeated assertion of human order over the formless chaos. The simple, rhythmic repetition of these protective phrases, often murmured just before closing one's eyes for sleep, was a profoundly therapeutic tool. It served to quiet the mind's anxieties about the unseen, replacing the fear of the dark with the comforting, reliable sound of one's own faith. The presence of the Djinn, therefore, enforced a collective discipline, a shared understanding that security was not a passive state, but an active, quiet, and necessary ritual maintained by every member of the tribe. The enduring human desire for easy wealth and lost fortune found its supernatural explanation in the folklore of the Djinn. They were often believed to be the custodians of vast hidden treasures, guarding the gold, jewels, and ancient artifacts buried in the deep desert ruins. This legend created a profound psychological conflict in the minds of travelers and treasure seekers. The desire for wealth versus the fear of the unseen guardian. Imagine a crumbling, forgotten ruin of an ancient city, half buried in the sand. The air is still and silent. The scent is dry dust and old stone. A traveller, led by rumours, discovers a sealed chamber. The local belief is clear. These ancient treasures are not abandoned. They are being actively protected by a powerful Ifrit or a particularly stubborn Djinn. The sound of this conflict is the low, rhythmic breathing of the fearful human, contrasting with the absolute silence of the ruin, which seems to hold its breath. The Djinn's method of guarding was often based on illusion. A treasure seeker might find a mound of glistening gold, only to have it dissolve into dust or camel dung the moment they touch it. They might see a brilliant jewel sparkling in the moonlight, only to find the next morning that it was merely a piece of coloured glass. This trickery was the ultimate thought trap, punishing greed and lack of piety. The moral of these stories was always the same. Wealth gained through hard work and honesty belongs to humans. Wealth found through exploiting the ruins belongs to the Djinn, and seeking it brings inevitable ruin or madness. This belief had a real-world stabilizing effect. By mythologizing the danger of the ruins, the folklore served to protect ancient burial sites and structures from casual looting. The fear of incurring the wrath of a wealthy, powerful Ifrit was a far more effective deterrent than any human law. The presence of the Djinn here served as the ultimate, invisible police force, ensuring that the natural order of property, even supernatural property, was maintained in the lawless expanse of the desert. Ultimately, the enduring concept of the Djinn serves as a profound meditation on the sheer scale of time and the ultimate fragility of human civilization. Since they are creatures with lifespans stretching back to the creation of the world, they are the silent witnesses to the rise and fall of countless empires. Imagine the perspective of a Djinn. They saw the great pyramids built, witnessed the glories of Babylon and the rise of Iram of the Pillars, and watched every civilization crumble back into the sand. Their knowledge is not historical, it is continuous. When a nomad rested near a forgotten well, he was sleeping beside a creature that remembered the construction of that well thousands of years ago. The sound here is the soft, relentless whisper of the sand, the sound of ages passing, wearing down stone and memory alike. The Djinn's long life makes human ambition seem laughably brief. They represent a sense of profound indifference to human striving. A human's entire existence, their loves, wars, and achievements, is nothing more than a fleeting moment in the presence of a being made of smokeless fire. This perspective, though unsettling, paradoxically offers a source of peace. By focusing the mind on the immense, indifferent scale of Djinn time, the listener's own, smaller anxieties about daily life begin to dissolve into insignificance. The presence of the Djinn in the folklore ensures that the Arabian desert is not empty, but is layered with millennia of unseen activity. Every dune, every rock formation, every echo in a cavern holds the memory of a society that exists just out of sight. This layering of invisible life transforms the terrifying emptiness of the desert into a spiritual sanctuary, a place where time is not a linear measure, but a vast, shimmering ocean, where the past, present, and future coexist in the quiet, fluid form of fire. We come now to the final, quiet reflection on the enduring folklore of the Djinn. We have travelled through the deep desert, listened to the phantom voices in the wind, and examined the paradox of beings created from formless fire yet possessing human morality. Now, let the complexities of the narrative settle into a simple, therapeutic truth. The ultimate function of the Djinn was not to terrify, but to explain the terrifying. They served as the great intellectual comfort of the desert, by attributing chaos, the sudden sickness, the vanished traveller, the deceptive mirage to a specific, defined, moral entity. The ancient mind could categorize and cope with the brutal unpredictability of their environment. The Djinn transformed random disaster into predictable peril. This distinction allowed the nomad to sleep. They might fear the Ifrit, but they did not fear the meaningless, chaotic void. They feared something with a name, and fear with a name can be managed with ritual and discipline. Allow this ancient concept to quiet your modern anxieties. Your own daily chaos, the sudden computer crash, the misplaced key, the unexpected fatigue, can be seen not as personal failure, but as the momentary mischief of an unseen force. By acknowledging that not all disorder is your fault, you grant your mind the permission to release control. Let the profound stillness of the desert night absorb your own fleeting worries. The great human comfort is in the knowledge that even in the vast emptiness of the world, we are never truly alone. We are simply surrounded by forces we have yet to name. We now leave the stories behind and surrender fully to the soundscape of the desert. The whispers of the Djinn have faded, replaced by the eternal, quiet sounds of the sand and stone. You are settled, safe, within the protective circle of your own awareness. Hear the rhythmic low sigh of the wind as it sweeps across the endless dunes, a sound that has remained unchanged for millennia. Feel the cool, dry air on your skin, a profound contrast to the heat of the day. All complexity, all fear of the unseen, has now been defined and contained by the ancient discipline of the desert people. Your mind, cleansed of the day's chatter, is ready for its own long journey into rest. Let the final thoughts of the Djinn remind you of the scale of time, that your own worries are merely moments in the presence of eternity. There is only the stillness of the starlit sky, the silent flow of the sand, and the steady, quiet rhythm of your own breath. There is nothing left to hold on to. Drift deeply, guided by the acceptance of the world's ancient, quiet, and profound mysteries. May your sleep be safe from the unseen.